at the Musial with Alan and Daniel. We'll talk about the Cardinals all night long. Everyone come gather round, listen to your favorite sound. We'll talk about the Cardinals all night long. We'll talk the games and all the rest, about the team that we love best. We'll talk about the Cardinals all night long. We're gonna talk about the Cardinals all night long.
Good morning. Welcome into another edition of Meet Me at Musial. I'm your host, Daniel Shoptaw. At C70 with me, as always, Alan Medlock, A Medlock 1. After a week off, and it wasn't really a week off. It was a week off from recording, but Alan and I got a chance to go to the podcaster day. And Alan, I know a lot of people have heard a lot about this, but Alan, it was good to see you, even though it was a kind of a brief time. And what'd you think?
Yeah, I had a blast. Always do. You're right. There were some new faces in there that we got to meet, and it was pleasant. It was just it was a crammed room, and we couldn't talk like we normally do. But that's okay. It was nice to see everybody, and the experience it's always awesome. So I always had a good time, and it's a good ball game to watch.
Well, yeah, at least part of it was. There was one of the losses to the Rockies, and I know there's been a lot of. I mean, if you were a regular listener of Cardinal Podcast, you've probably heard a lot about the day. We're going to talk about it some too, just in case you're not. But now we're here a week later, and it feels like most everybody have put out some shows. But before we get too deep into it, I do want to take a moment, if Alan will indulge me, and say I really thanks to everyone. Thanks to the Cardinals for doing this. This is, I've been doing this since 2011 with just a little bit of a blip around COVID, and we always appreciate it. I mean, and it's easy. There's been times, I think after COVID we weren't 100% sure it was going to come back, and I know the conversations this weekend were what happens if Mo stops, moves on, either this year or next year, and will they keep doing it? I think they will. And I think the Cardinals have been more than gracious to us as bloggers and podcasters over the last, over more than a decade now. And we really appreciate it. It's not just Blogger Day. I mean, there's been a lot of that, but that we have had times where we've, in the off season, been able to, email Q&As with John Mozeliak and other things like that. So we really appreciate what the Cardinals are doing and what they do to try to stay engaged with this part of the fan base. Which, I mean, it works in their advantage too. There's no doubt about it. It gets, they get to know what the fans are talking about, and not just the knee jerk fans, but some that spend a little time on it. So again, thanks to the Cardinals for that. I also wanted to say, thanks to everybody that came. And personally, I felt I don't even really know how to say how I felt, but there were so many people that came up to me and wanted to talk to me, and we're just so nice to me. I think it was probably because I was the old guy in the room, for the most part, but it was just great. And I don't know. Again, I don't have the words for it, but I really did appreciate the consideration and the thoughtfulness of everybody that was there. It was great to see you and Ben and Nate from Talking About Birds. I have been on their show a number of times, got a chance to interact with them, and saw David Jones, who my gateway partner, who I've not met before, and then people like Jake Wood. I've been on his show, and Kareem and Adam that I've seen, with the great prospect guys. Got a chance to be with them, and meet them for the first time. Kyle was there, which is Kyle. You know how that's going to go.
Mhm.
Um, the man who unintentionally somehow wore a purple shirt to a Rockies Cardinals game. It's amazing what goes on in Kyle's mind. I don't think anybody wants to be there, but it's interesting. Um, again, I appreciate. It's always great to be there, but this year it felt like so much more. And I was glad to meet some new people. I didn't get to see everybody, and I really wish I had. I should have done a better job of getting around. I sometimes get in the familiar circles. Oh, and I talked to Ben Godar, Dan Bocal from Cardinals Off Day. We're there, and Alex Crisafulli snuck in, which was
Yes.
great. It's always great to see Alex. I appreciate Ben doing whatever. I don't know if he greased the palm of somebody. I don't know how he got Alex in, because Alex had bought his own ticket and to come in, and Godar got him in, and I appreciate that. It's always good to see Alex. So and I know I'm forgetting some people. I just wanted everybody to know it was a great time, and I appreciate seeing everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the beauty of it, and you see some of the old familiars and meet some new guys, and see that there's still some interest in doing this and talking about things that we love, and it's always a lot of fun. I mean, it's one, you're in the ballpark. Two, you get treated extremely well, and you get to hang around a lot of like-minded people, and that's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think if they did this even without Mo, or even without whoever the GM or president of baseball operations were, it would still be worth going to. I mean, if nothing else,
Oh yeah,
say free tickets
absolutely.
prepaid. But to be in this community, it is hard for me to. I still think of you as kind of like one of the newer guys, right? Because but you've been
Yeah.
at it for 8 years, and you're one of the old guard in the room too. And it's I hate to. I don't want to put that on you. I don't want to make you
No,
feel
no,
like
no,
you're
no.
old, but
No, it's awesome. I think.
yeah, it's just incredible. Oh, and I didn't even forgot to shout out. We had the whole VEB contingent there. That was pretty cool, I think. And Jason Hill, and who's been on here, and Heather and Gabe and Blake, and Blake's also been on here. I'm looking forward to actually. I kind of arranged. I think we're gonna have, hopefully, if I can get it all worked out, we're gonna have a big minor league show sometime in August. I'm looking at like Kyle and Blake and Kareem and Adam, well, yeah, I'm probably Adam. I'll see if I can get Adam in here. I don't think I talked to him about it, and see if we can get all that knowledge together, and I can just sit back and maybe learn something.
That'd be awesome.
That should be fun. But we'll work on that for after the draft and after everything else. Um, we had the chance to talk to Mo. And like I say, if you haven't, Viva's got the whole audio. If you want to go over look at them, you can listen to the whole thing, and you can form your own opinions if you want to. But Alan, what did you take away from what Mo was saying?
I always feel like I'm a prisoner of the moment when I say these things,
Mhm.
because it's one of those to where I'm trying to think back of he he's really good with the crowds. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? He's a
yeah,
great. I've always felt like he's really engaging and whatnot. One thing that I felt this year that I I don't know if it was, I question whether it was more this year than ever, but it stands out this year to me, mainly because they're playing they're 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 playing well. I thought this was the most optimistic he had been. I felt like body language was really telling. It was funny. I was in the back of the room, and Dan and I were back there, and
mhm.
I said we were kind of talking, and I was like, man, he's pretty upbeat about a lot of things, more so than we had seen him forever. And I don't know if that is, if I'm reading too much into it, of hey, we're gonna go out having a good time, type situation, or if it was a hey, we see where we're struggling, and we see some things that we think are going to turn around. He was talking about that, talking about being buyers, being very specific on what they wanted, being very specific on Jordan Walker. I thought being he being upfront about some of their disappointments and whatnot, but there was not a lot of focus on that. I really felt like there was a lot of positivity coming from him. There was a lot of, they felt like, momentum coming, and I thought it was an extremely upbeat talk, and I think it was one of his longer ones. I walked away thinking, well, this kind of gets my juices flowing a little bit, because you can kind of tell that they think they're in this and they're going to stay in this.
Yeah, I think, of course, coming off of last year, you're in a better situation than you were last year, so you gotta feel at least somewhat better, right? Like he said, first thing he even said is, "It could be better, but it could be worse."
Yeah,
And I think that probably informs a little bit of that as well, but yeah, I mean, granted, they're still not a 500 team.
yeah. I want to
Um,
back up on that too, though.
yeah,
He made the comment much worse,
right.
meaning that, and then he had called out his failure from last year. I thought that was a big part of that. It just came across like, yeah, there's probably some relief because it's not last year, but I do feel like there's some belief that they're going to be pretty good.
But, how much of that, and I get what most say, and then you take what your situation is, and I'm not trying to poke like that, but, again, this is a team that is, as of right now, a game under 500. I think it's probably a couple games under at that time. Um, and if it wasn't for the fact that there's 3 wild cards and the rest of the National League is mush, would very likely be a number of games out of contention. I mean, not that they would be completely out of it, but, you're in a normal year, a 1 game under 500 team you would think would be 5 or 6 games out of the wild card, right? Um, and now they would make the playoffs if they were to end it today, right? Um, and some of that is, taking advantage of your situation. And it does allow for the fact that you're probably going to be competitive all year long.
Yeah, no, and that's exactly the way that I took it.
Mhm.
And I will tell you, today's Flag Day. If you didn't know
Yeah,
that,
yes,
and
this is
they're in
true.
second place.
Yeah.
Yes, and you have all your Central left to play. So I mean, I feel like I kind of felt like there was a lot of optimism from that, and what it tells me too is they believe that the big two being Arenado and Goldschmidt are going to hit,
Which
and
is an
that
interesting
changes things dramatically.
well, yeah. Yeah. I don't I wrote the Substack yesterday, and I probably was a little more negative than I should have been because I just kinda said, "Look, we keep talking about the schedule getting easier, but the schedule that's coming up is basically a bunch of teams that are just like the Cardinals."
Sure.
When you get into winning percentage, and we saw that to some degree, and, that's somewhat informed by the fact that, they go and split with the Rockies. They did wind up, this I wrote this before yesterday, but, they wound up winning 2 of 3 from the Pirates, but, we'll see what they do in Chicago because you never know when Cardinals and
Exactly.
Cubs get together.
Yeah.
Um, but it just feels like we've seen them at times this year play to the level of their competition, and you're getting to the point where you don't want to. I mean, yeah, if you're playing 3-game series, if you can win 2 out of 3, you're alright. But you don't wanna win 2 out of 3 and then lose, 2 out of 3 in the next series, and you're just playing a lot of 500
Well,
ball.
no, you're exactly right, and it's funny. It's going back to what we talked about last week, to where a lot of the NFL mindset of having 162 weeks. You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying?
Yeah.
This is a 162 game season, not one game. You know what I'm
Sure,
saying? One
sure,
season
sure.
every day. One more win against the Rockies changes everything on the mindset. You know what I mean? You lose
Yeah.
two one run games. Well, you win 3 or 4 there, and you turn around and win the Pittsburgh series, and things look a little bit different. I think there's a lot of I, I, I think it's kind of a gut punch sometimes when you assume that you're going to win the series against the Colorado, you end up splitting it. I was as disappointed as anybody. Don't get me wrong,
Yeah.
but it's funny. It's one of those to where at this point, the National League is so middling that one game changes a whole outlook. And that's honestly in June, feel like that's a little bit dangerous, but that may be how the season wraps together. I mean,
Mhm.
look at Atlanta lost their best pitcher and arguably their best hitter. Maybe
Yeah.
not even arguably, maybe their best player. You never know what's going to happen there.
Yeah.
Philadelphia, are they going to play at this pace all year? I mean, it's been a month, so you never know.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, it's funny how the perspective changes, and it. I mean, we could be sitting here thinking, "Hey, that was a great homestand, not just a good homestand." If they'd have just won one of those one-run games,
Yeah. I think it's also a little bit fresh. I mean, like, I was at the game Friday night as well, and they
hmm
won that game, which is good. But, they were down 5-4 in, like, the 7th, and you had that idea that here we go again. Now they were able
Little
to
League
get to
Grand Slam.
Yeah, I mean, you saw
You know what
that,
I'm
and it's
saying?
like,
That's the
yeah,
one that bothered me
exactly,
the most.
exactly, and so you're like, this is a you shouldn't have this much trouble with the Rockies either, right? I mean, they did win 2 of the games, but
Yeah,
they
I argue about that though. I'm
okay,
not a big I am not a big um I'm not I feel like you have to win every day type
sure,
situation. And I
sure,
mean,
I get that.
my issue with the playing the schedule is I'm not sure who the Cardinals know who they're playing on Monday. You know what I mean by
Yeah,
that?
yeah,
That's my only issue with those because I think that I 5-4 wins are as important as a 5-1 win.
mhm,
You know what I mean? And the other team's getting paid to play as well.
sure,
And it's one of those situations where playing the schedule is always dangerous for me.
mhm. Yeah, I mean, I get that, and when you're talking about, overall, you're right, a win is a win, it doesn't matter how you get it. I just think when you're trying to for me, looking at the mindset of how they're playing, I guess is what it's like, if they're playing well, they're probably not getting down to the Rockies. I mean, more than once in a series. You know what I'm saying? I just feel like if everything's clicking, this team is better than that. So when it's not clicking, when you're struggling, you start wondering, well, will it ever click? Now, again, you're right. They win one more game of that series, we probably feel okay because you don't expect to sweep a 4-game series no matter who you're
Yeah.
playing. And so, and the way they lost Saturday, with error with a key error that just kind of blew everything up. Um, and we've seen a lot of that. The fielding has not been good. But they've won in spite of it. Um, I don't know. I mean, I'm hopeful that they put together. If they can win 2 or 3 series here in a row, I think we'll feel a lot better about what's going on. And that goodness gracious, that could put them at the second or maybe even the first wild card, depending
Yeah.
on who goes
Yeah, I
down.
was gonna say. I mean, I think there's some apprehension. I can sense it in your voice, and I feel it too. Of when's the long streak coming of losing? You
Yeah.
know what I'm saying? A little bit. Um, I feel like there's an uptick in enough guys though, where they're gonna be able to sustain. Like Gray this week probably showed that they're not going to go on a very long losing streak.
Mm,
You know what
mm,
I'm saying? I mean,
mhm.
he's had 3 bad starts in a row, and as far as where we're concerned as an ace, and he did his job. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? I
Yeah.
worry about Lynn going deep. Gibson's going to be. I mean, Alex called this out. It was so funny at the game. I like what Kyle Gibson brings, but
Oh,
he
yeah.
goes, "This is just a prototypical start. 6 innings, 3 runs, stay in the game." I said, "Yeah, I mean that's pretty much."
Sure.
That's what it is,
Yeah.
one of those things. But, I love the Michaelis matching up with Skeens the other night. And it's one of those to where I was like, I just like to watch these guys, as veteran as they are, just compete.
Mhm.
And that tells me that I think you're going to stay out of your 8-9 game losing streaks.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that, I mean, you never know when yeah, you never know if you're gonna lose a Gray start because your Gray could pitch well and you lose 2-1 or something like
Sure.
that.
Oh, yeah.
But you're probably not gonna lose, like, 2 or 3 of his turns in a row or anything like that. Um, so, yeah, I can see that, but I guess there is concern about I think there's concern about Lance Lynn, because Lance Lynn has gotten into I think, past the 5th 3 times this year.
Yeah.
He hasn't gotten the game that he pitched yesterday, 4 1/3, is the longest one he's had in this month. Um, he's for a guy that was supposed to be eating innings, he's getting to that 100 pitch mark way too early, right? He's
Yeah.
not giving up the home runs, and he's giving up a lot of unearned runs. I mean, his ERA looks pretty good, but then you start factoring in how many unearned runs he's given up,
Hmm.
um, and that starts to change a little bit. So I am concerned about that. I mean, they do tend to maybe he can keep them in a ball game, but um, and I Michaelis has definitely pitched better as of late, and if this keeps up, that's that's a definite advantage for the Cardinals.
Do
Um, go ahead.
Now, walking away, and I don't even know if this was a topic that we had for later in the show.
Mm.
Do they add to the rotation?
Oh, I think they have to. I think Mo even was
Well,
really
no,
talking
it
about
was
it.
funny. He didn't telegraph it much. You know what
Mhm.
I'm saying? There was a lot of I, I don't know. I thought that was pretty interesting. Um, do we see Steven Matt start one?
Yeah, Mance is going to start at some point in time, and although it still feels like he's what a couple weeks away, he's still got at least a couple of rehab starts, I
Hmm.
think.
I think Springfield this
Um,
weekend.
yeah, and that may be a real key on seeing how long because he's going to make at least one more. But I'd have to look, but it feels like his first couple have been short, and I don't know that they've been all that effective. But yeah, I think Mets will probably do that. I think though, they're probably open to moving him to the bullpen if they could get somebody else. But that's the problem right now is that fifth starter spot is, Palante had a good outing.
Yeah,
What was that? I forgot what night that was.
2 or 3, he's
Sunday, I
thrown
guess.
pretty well.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, but it's also only three, it's
I
like,
agree.
are
Agreed.
we going to get, is this okay? Every two out of three, he's going to be fine. Okay, good. If is every other one, or is it just, hey, he matched up well against, let's see, he went Sunday against the Rockies, didn't he?
Yeah, one Sunday.
So, is it just a situation where he pitched against the right team? Who knows? Yeah, he pitched much better. And I definitely think you give him another turn or two through the rotation. And that may be enough to get Steven Matz back. But it still feels like you can upgrade this rotation. We've said that since, the off season, right? We thought going into this winter they needed to get people that were better than Michaelis, and Michaelis still is probably your number two. So I think Mo will be looking at that fifth starter spot. But I do think it's going to be a fifth starter, right? I mean, he's not going out and getting a guy that moves everybody else down.
Yeah.
He's going to get somebody that just kind of plugs into the rotation and gives them stability because they're not. I mean, he was pretty. I feel like he was pretty clear about they're not going to be players for anything big.
No. Oh yeah, and that's. I thought he telegraphed that by talking about he didn't say these words, but you could read them that they're not going to give away a lot.
Mhm.
You know, did you get that feeling?
Well,
Because
yeah,
he called out a bunch of names, meaning that they're highly on the radar right now, as far as guys that are within the that are in the organization right now, and talking about how the Memphis guys are close, but they're looking for consistency, and talking about Walker, and those are the guys that to get those big names are going to be the ones that those will be the names you'd have to trade away, and I don't think they're that comfortable doing that.
no. And the Cardinals really don't have the depth to do anything big. I mean, because
Sure.
yeah, there are guys at AAA that might be getting close to the majors, although like Mo said, he's been hoping for a fifth starter to come out of there for quite some time, and nobody's taking advantage of it. Um, but the only pieces they have to trade, I mean, I feel like that are going to get you something big would be Tink Hintz and then Jordan Walker, I guess,
Yeah.
probably. I mean, and they're not going to trade either one of those. They can't
No.
afford to trade Tink Hintz,
And
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 Walker's
you're
going back.
no, and you're 100% correct on that. And my from me, where it used to be, hey, let's I would be okay moving some of these guys. The names that you just said, I think you have to keep, because I think now you're seeing with Wynn, you see him with Gorman for the most part, that's the new wave that's coming.
Mhm.
And I think that you're gonna have to hold on to those and just keep your head above water right now with what you have, as far as the trade for a fifth guy, and a right-handed hitting outfielder that he talked about. But you're gonna keep those other dudes because that's the future.
Yeah.
And I in the past few years, I don't know if we could see past that. The fact that,
Mhm.
hey, you have Arnauto Goldschmidt, you've got to run through it right now. Well, I think we can see that now that's the tail end type side of things, and this next group is the one that's going to move the needle a little bit, and that we could be in the middle of the rebuild, just don't realize it yet.
Yeah, I think there's something to that because there's a I don't know 70%, 75% chance that this is the last run for Goldschmidt, right? And
Oh
if
yeah,
if you're looking at a World Series for those two guys, you'd have to just. I mean, I don't think the Cardinals have a chance to really to go out. You couldn't. I don't think they could acquire the pieces to make them World Series favorites or anything like that, especially not now. So then you just like, well, okay, we'll see if we can get there, but try to get another postseason run out of it. But You're not going to mortgage the future for something like that. If you were close, maybe, but that's just not the Cardinals' way either, right? I mean, we talked about it with Wainwright and with Molina, and they're ending their runs, or if is like, should they go out and spend and really try for this, and they didn't do it. So it doesn't seem like they would do that for I think that it's going to be interesting when we look back in 5-10 years and wonder if the Goldschmidt Arenado era was wasted. But for right now, it is what it is, and you just hope that you can get into the postseason and somebody gets hot.
Yeah, yeah. The kind of from the enthusiasm and bringing them both into where we are now is pretty crazy, and I guess that's just the game itself. I mean, just a question I want to pose to you though.
Uh-huh.
um has the fact that Burleson becoming the Burleson that they thought he was going to be, and led to a lot of frustration last year of the his outlying numbers point to the fact that he's going to be a pretty darn good hitter, to
Mhm.
now him becoming one of their most important hitters. Does that play a major role in the Goldschmidt situation?
You mean that because they can put Burleson at first base? Is that what
That's
you're
what I
looking at?
think is going to happen.
Yeah.
Or
I
am I looking at it as, am I becoming path of least resistance, thinking that's going to be the best fit, or is it going to be a turn? Is it going to turn into a situation where Walker turns into that fit?
Yeah, I think one of them does.
Yeah,
I think the fact that the Cardinals had the Burleson and the Walker, even the Gorman possibilities at first base is one of the reasons they didn't extend Paul Goldschmidt in this
sure,
minutes.
sure.
As
Fair to both
much,
parties on that, by the way.
yeah,
You know
yeah.
what
I
I'm
mean,
saying? It's one of those. It's like, hey, we're going to be upfront about this one.
yeah,
I agree with that.
yeah. Both sides seem to be open to that, and you wonder if Goldschmidt would have liked to have it now. But Goldschmidt seems to be the kind of guy. I don't know. I don't know. It's like if he had a down season this year, which he's had somewhat, you know, could you see him just walking away at the end of the year without, or do you think he's talked in the future about, being done before he's 40, but maybe playing another year or two? Do you think he's out there on the market, or do you think that, I don't know. I mean, part of
That's
me thinks
something I hadn't thought about.
neither until just now, but part of me is
Yeah,
like, okay, he wouldn't want to go out like this, but part of me is like, he feels like he might just say, you know what, I've made my money. You know, I'm not going to play another year or two anyway, and I don't know that I want to change situations again. Um, so I mean, I don't think it's likely, but I think it's at least possible.
yeah. Is he 36 right now?
I think that's right. Um, yeah, I think. Let me see when his birthday is. Uh, let's see, September 10th, 1987. So he will be 37 in September.
Okay.
So and like I said, I'm pretty sure there was at least a report back maybe last year when they're talking maybe some extensions that he didn't necessarily need to play till he was 40. So you're
Yeah.
looking at just a couple of years, which maybe you go somewhere and sign a 2-year deal. But after a year like this, and again, we're not halfway through, so it's possible he could have a really strong July or something and push his numbers back up. But if you're looking at it the way it is right now, you know who is laying out the money for Paul Goldschmidt? I mean,
Yeah.
is he content to be a bench platoon guy on a contender, or does he oh yeah, well maybe a team like the White Sox, sure, but do you really want to spend your last couple of years in a situation like that? So I don't know. I think it's interesting, and I mean, I guess you don't rule out a return to the Cardinals if they could get him for you know a cheaper price. But given the options they have and some of the other things that they need to spend money on, it just feels like that's probably not going to happen.
Yeah. It it pains you to say, are the Cardinals better off to not let it happen?
Right? Yeah.
That's the one thing that bothers me, and we talked about that a lot last week. It's you know, it, yeah, it's a tough call. It's a tough
Mhm.
call, but I mean, it's one of those as well where the replacement, whether you can pin him down or whatnot, the replacements and names are definitely there.
Well, and I think the fact that Burleson has started to hit,
Yeah.
and I think that's the biggest thing is allowing it. Because if you had thought Jordan Walker was going to be that guy, I still think you probably sign Goldschmidt right now, right? Because I don't
Yeah.
know that you're
Oh, sure.
100% comfortable with
100%.
letting Walker take that over next year. And if it works out, great, and if not, no, it doesn't. But with knowing that you've already got a bat in Burleson that can do it, I think you're a lot more likely to then let Goldschmidt walk.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, completely. I mean, you can see it. You see it pretty clear. Um, yeah. I mean, I'm a huge Burleson guy anyway. So I like the bat in the lineup, but that means nothing to our conversation. I'm just saying I'm a fan. Yeah, I don't know. I know we're always looking ahead, and
Mhm.
here we are in a big series this weekend, and we're talking about the off season or
Yeah,
potentially. Is there a world where Goldschmidt gets moved at the deadline?
I don't think so. Um, and for a number of reasons. One, I just don't, like we said, I don't know that there's anybody that necessarily pays you a lot to take him, right? If you're only going to get some double A prospect that might or might, lottery ticket type of player, there's no point in moving Goldschmidt, right? I mean, the money's not that big of a deal, and he's producing enough. I mean, yeah, I just don't think that. I think that if you are trading Goldschmidt, no matter what he's doing on the field, you're still signaling to that club that you know, it's almost like, well, almost like that hater to, getting traded from the Brewers,
Yeah,
It's like you're signaling to the club that we don't think we're gonna do it.
good point. That's a
Um,
great point.
I mean, like I said, Goldschmidt is still somewhat productive and still a threat. There's no doubt
Yeah,
about that. So, um, I think that if the Cardinals were maybe 4 or 5 games out at the deadline or getting close to the deadline, maybe, but, if they think they're gonna be contenders, they're not gonna swap him, and the same situation is true for Ryan Helsley, right? I mean, there's been a lot of talk about him being one of the more valuable assets that the Cardinals could move, but, you know, as if they're trying to win this year, they're definitely not gonna do that. I mean, maybe this offseason maybe there's a conversation to be had, but, um, you have to keep him if you're gonna be contending, and then, you know, again, that's I hate I think we talked about it last time too. The Cardinals may wind up getting stuck in this spot where they're going to try to make the playoffs, but they're still not that great. They're going to wind up missing out on a window of getting, like they did last year, some replenishment of their system. Um, so hopefully they make the playoffs and they do something. Again, it's kind of that idea: is it worth making the playoffs and losing in 3 games or whatever the case may be, versus having a chance to, get some pieces that might help you the next time? But there's a lot of ifs there, and I think you take your postseason and you worry about that.
yeah, yeah. No, completely agree. I mean, that's the expectation in St. Louis, and I think any berth would be big, and then it would
Mhm.
also draw criticism when they get eliminated. You know what I'm saying? It's not everybody's gonna be happy, but it's still gonna be a playoff run.
Yeah, yeah. I just the silver lining of last year was to be able to
Yes.
sell off those pieces, and again, they didn't get a transformational return. I guess we'll see what Roby turns out and looks like, and but they've also got pieces that are already close to at least contributing. Roberta and Kloffenstein. We may see one of them up this year, and again, getting him a piece that comes back and makes a major league debut is something, right? And given how a lot of these trades turn out, even for the big stars, you know, you can't really expect, I don't think, to transform your team in a trade deadline situation.
Sure.
Um,
The
um, Go ahead.
Well, and it's yeah, maybe it's because it's fresh on our mind and they were just brought in. I mean, you probably expect to see JC next year, I would think, depending on how the infield shakes out. Then
Probably,
you have
yeah.
arms that could probably help. I don't know. I mean, it's one. you want to say successful, but it's the first time we've seen a full
Hmm.
dump either. You
Right.
know what I mean? So I don't know.
I mean, these guys, but I think it'd be successful. I mean, they weren't going to sign any of those guys, and if you get any pieces that can help you at any level, I mean, at any, even a little bit at the major leagues, and I think you've had a successful. Is it overwhelming? Maybe not, but I think
Yeah,
it's. Kyle so often talks about how hard it is to make a major league debut, and that anybody
sure.
that does, has should be really respected, and is a success even if they only get 10 at bats in the major leagues or whatever the case may be. Um, and so I think that that's the case. If you can get some guys up here, if any of these guys, and the Showalter kid seems to be intriguing, but he's a ways off.
Mm,
But if you can get any of these guys up here, then that was a win, I think, at the trade deadline.
yeah, that's true.
Um, Other things that Mo said, that kind of stood out. I think, well, one, that the pitching lab is still not anywhere close to being done, and they keep running into the snags and loopholes. I heard Jeff Jones on, I think it was the That's a Winner podcast, and maybe Dylan the card. I guess maybe Dylan the Cards. I listened to a lot of podcasts as I was driving back and forth, so
Sure.
it's sometimes they blend together. But I did hear him suggest that it's possible that Mo's next job in baseball is to oversee that project, right? That he may step away from his duties, but he's going to, like move to Florida and really supervise that lab getting built, because it's been a big deal for him for a long time, and I thought that was a very interesting suggestion, but it did sound like what next after next spring training is when they'd finally maybe actually start getting to tear stuff up, like
Yeah,
three string trainings after they said, "Oh, this is it. This is the last one at this place,"
yeah,
and it still looks the same. It's remarkable what red tape can do.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Uh, yeah, I'll believe it when I see it. Not. I mean, and it's one of
Sure.
those. It's not, and not in a way that is like you got to prove it type deal. I'm just like I don't. The emphasis is weird. It's almost like the push in the beginning should have been tempered a little bit more than it was.
Hmm.
That's the one thing because then you just look dumb when you overpromise.
Yeah, but this has been what 7, 8 years now.
Yeah, and
Um,
that was one of the at one of the meetings. It was a hey, we're going to try to find a way to be progressive, and of course
sure.
the basic way still hasn't even broken ground.
Well, and I think that's what it's kind of what I wanted to get at. We've talked over the last few years about how they're behind on some things, and especially on the pitching side of things. And you wonder if they had been able to put this thing together faster, if it had come together in the year or two that they thought it was going to, where they would be at now. Would they be able to develop these guys? Would they have been able to hire the staff that got them to transform people, or what the case may be? I don't know. It's very possible that you'd have a lab with the same people in the same mindset, and you're getting a whole lot, they're going in there to work on ground balls or something. But I just wonder how much the pitching development philosophy would have changed over the last few years if they'd had that option.
Yeah, it's true. True that. Yeah, the yeah, I'm ready. I look forward to seeing the progress about how the game was just changing in that kind of realm, which leads me back to this. I
Mm.
was kind of not I was surprised and almost happy to see his disdain for the Rapsodo stuff and videos. That kind of surprised me
Yeah.
that he was as open as he was about that, about how he's not a big and not a fan of players going on their own to do those things. And in his explanation of you could just tell it was the player's health is secondary to the promotion of what they're trying to do, and
Yeah.
that I thought was pretty telling. I was like, yeah, he's been pretty open about this, and you can look at it and say, well, that's just because they feel like they have to go outside because they're not getting help there. But I think that's exactly what he's pushing back on of, you know that's it's not necessarily the help that they're getting, it's more the promotion for the company.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot to what he said for sure.
Sure,
Now, and again, I don't want it to come across that these companies aren't trying to
sure,
improve the
sure.
players. Obviously, they are. If nothing else, it's good for their business, right? I mean, if everybody comes to them and they're terrible afterwards, nobody comes to them. But I do, yeah, I think that, and what Mo also kind of said or kind of implied is, they know how they want to use their player too, right?
Hmm.
I mean, when you go to Driveline or some of the others,
Sure,
they're gonna I feel like, I mean, they're gonna tailor their plan around what your talents are, but they've got, like, some general goals in mind, right? And
sure.
those goals may not mesh with what the organization wants. And so you've kinda gotta undo a little bit of that when they come in, or have them look at things differently. And again, that's not even including the, possibilities of injury, or of a swing that gets completely messed up, trying to fix that later on.
Hmm.
Because if something doesn't work at a drive line, if somebody comes in and gets worse, they don't put that on their videos. But and they probably don't. It's probably not a big thing. I mean, a little bit of word of mouth, but it's like, okay, well, this guy had a bad experience, and 10 other people have had a good one, so I don't worry about it as much. But that player comes back to his organization, and they were expecting him to be a middle of the order guy, and now his swing's so goofed up that it's going to take a long time for him to get back to being productive.
Yeah,
Yeah, I get it. I never thought about it like that. I always kind of thought maybe the organizations kind of liked that because they didn't have to spend the money. But I can understand the drawbacks for sure.
sure. Yeah, that's and it's completely understandable. But I mean, it was refreshing to see him being so open about it.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. That was not, because I think it would have been very. I think there were politics answers there of, saying, "Oh, well, we hate that they feel like they need to go somewhere else because we feel like we give, but if
Yeah,
they have to do that, and I think Mo also did kind of to some degree say that, I said, I understand why they feel like they need to
sure.
do that they think they need to go get it and this stuff, but grass is not always greener kind of type of thing,
Yeah,
as you pointed out, for his son went and tried to get
yeah, exactly.
some speed, and it didn't quite pan out for him. But I think that, yeah, I don't think they should necessarily be dinged for that. I mean, because that is a definite. I don't, and I wonder. I mean, I guess it probably has similar. I wonder how much that's the prevalent idea in baseball, within the organizations. If most organizations have that same philosophy, if they'd really rather their players not go there, or if some of them are glad that they are getting, some help outside.
Yeah, yeah. It's I would say as as traditional thinking as most of the front offices are, I would assume that this is probably a industry wide idea. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah,
Or let's say I wouldn't say industry wide. I would say it was probably more likely than not. Most organizations feel that way.
yeah. I think you're probably right. And I mean, again, the liability side of things just
And
on
yeah,
its
oh yeah,
own.
because like I said, he used the term as well, assets.
Yeah. Yeah, he didn't want to. I think it's fair, but I mean, when you are talking in that realm, sometimes that works that way, even though it's the asset is an actual person.
True.
Trying to think anything. I know the Jordan Walker conversation. I know you were talking earlier about body language and everything
Oh
of that
man,
nature, and
yeah.
after the interview, I talked again with Dan, and he said that you and he had watched, and as he talked about Jordan Walker, that his body language shifted. What did you
Oh
see there when he
well,
was
it was
discussing him?
the minute the minute the name and the question was brought up, his shoulders got stiff back, and he took a deep breath because it's obviously something he's been asked a bunch,
Yeah,
type situation. And there was an element I was thinking this may not be good just by the way that he was. I was like, this. Let's see how this goes because at first thought I was thinking there is a little bit of animosity to this question, but it wasn't that way. And I
Mhm.
think he realized too that his frustration showed because he made the comment about how he's handling it like a pro and he's been a great guy, and he said it's nothing personal. But I do feel, and Mo even said this, the frustrations are they know what he can do, they just can't figure out why it's not happening at the big league level, or
Yeah.
at this point at the Memphis level, type situation. And I mean, there you can tell there's clearly some frustration there. And I don't mean it to sound like they're mad at the player. I do feel like there's some frustration the fact of they can't figure out why the heck this isn't happening.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, we've seen Walker get a couple home runs lately down in Memphis, so maybe some things are starting to click. But as Mo said, they got to produce, right? And at
Oh
this
yeah, I loved it.
level,
Yeah.
this level they've got. There's only a certain times. Your reputation or your promise gets you so far, but you've got to produce, and I think that was what we saw when they sent him back down. I also thought it was very interesting that Mo didn't say there were necessarily any benchmarks for him returning, right? It wasn't that they needed to see his first home run or they needed to see this or that. There was a lot of different pieces that they wanted him working on, and they would, and it sounded also to me like it was going to take a stretch of good run in Memphis
Yeah,
before they even gave him consideration, which, I mean, given that they didn't bring him up when Newt got hurt, I think was pretty telling right there, right?
sure.
That it wasn't just we'll bring him up first opportunity. It's he's going to stay down there until he learns this.
Yes. I mean, and it's I would you be completely shocked if we don't see him again this year?
Completely shocked? No, I would still be pretty surprised.
Yeah.
Um, because I think that one, if we don't see him again, I think it's a really telling indictment of how they've developed him. We talked about this some, I think, last week with the idea he was slow. He had a really good, strong spring training last year for the first half. It's tailed off, but they went ahead and brought him up anyway. Then that didn't work. They sent him to minors for a month, and he came back and did all right. But if he's after all this time spends all but a month of 2024 in the minor leagues, man, I just not that that's going to affect him necessarily future wise, but
Hmm.
I think it definitely shows that the organization needs to get a better idea of how they're developing players.
Yeah, that's true. That's true, and that's troubling. And unfortunately,
Yeah, yeah, and I think that, I mean, I think we'll probably and hopefully, he gets on a run and we see him, maybe right around the All Star break or right after. Um, and and then it also depends on the roster, right? I mean, who's healthy, who's not, where's a spot for him? Are you, because I mean, right now, you could, remove it for mean or something like that. But, at some point in time, there may be a difficult decision once Newt Bar comes back, once Contreras comes back, once Edmund comes back. I mean, all these guys, I don't know about Newt Bar, but, the other two guys could be back, before the break at least. Contreras could be back before we record next, it
yeah,
sounds like. And so, you start wondering then, okay, well, how do you get him on this roster unless somebody else gets hurt, of course. So it may also not be all in his hands, but he needs to get to the point where he's at least forcing the issue.
sure. No, I agree. I mean, to where it leaves no question that I feel like that's probably what they have to do. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Just wait on that and just be patient. And I think that they were in need of something so quickly that they kind of forced. Well, and he forced their hand too. I mean, there's no denying that. But yeah, I think they can be patient on this one.
Yeah. But I think an organization, I don't know. I feel like they should stick to their plan as much as they can, right? I mean, yes, player can force the hand, but I think it really needs to be forced. You know what I'm saying? You really
Yeah, oh
need to
yeah,
take an advantage and look at this and say, are we being caught up in the moment or is he truly ready?
yeah,
And sometimes they are truly ready and they need to be brought up. But I think there's a lot of times, and I think last year was they got caught up in the moment of it. And, Mo said at the thing, if we were sitting here last year at whatever time, which was right around the same time, mid June, And if you said who was going to have who are you more high on, Walker or Wynn, most people would have said Walker.
Hmm.
I don't know. After seeing Mason Wynn last spring training, I've been pretty high on him. I would have
Yeah.
thought. I mean, they were different players, and but I think I'm gonna like. I think the overall game and consistency of Mason Wynn may be better than. And maybe not. Maybe Jordan Walker will have the better career, but of course I'm a sucker for a shortstop, so I
Sure.
think there's
Oh
that.
yeah,
There's that,
absolutely.
but I mean I don't think you can overstate what Mason Wynn has brought to this team this year for
Oh
sure.
yes. Yep, completely agree.
Yeah.
That's and it has a lot to do with playing in the middle of the infield and being exciting doing it. Now, obviously, I mean that's the opinion around baseball, but more than anything, that's the opinion around St. Louis. And like last night, I mean, it was one of those. He made that sliding, or yesterday afternoon, he made that sliding catch up the middle. That was awesome. Threw him out at first to kill a rally, and it's becoming so commonplace for that to happen that doesn't really even get the headline anymore.
Yeah.
And that tells you a lot. That's You're going to live with some errors from him just because he's young, but the ground he covers is noticeable.
Yeah, I think if I remember right, there were some years where Ozzie led the league in errors just because he was getting the
Oh
balls
yeah,
that nobody else could,
yeah.
right?
It happens with a good shortstops quite a bit.
Right. So, and Mo was pretty fulsome in his praise of
Oh
Wynn
yeah,
as well, saying that he felt like he was a future superstar. And I just, again, and I know we talked about this last time, but I really wonder if how much of that is because you know, he had a better spring training, I think, overall than Jordan Walker did last year. But they had the plan that he was going to. I think they had the plan he was going to Springfield, and he pushed him to Memphis. But they left him there and let him develop some. I still, I'm always going to wonder if they had done the same thing with Jordan Walker, if they'd let him play 2 or 3 months in Memphis last year before bringing him up, would that have changed how he gets going back? Would he be in the minor leagues now? I guess we'll never know.
yeah, yep,
Um, Anything else off of Mo? I'm trying to think. I'm just trying to think back of comments and talks. He got the question early on, and I think it turned out to be a better question. I appreciate that um, to let his son ask the question, but you always get a little concerned when a kid's going to ask a question. But he asked a good one. It's like what's hardest part of his job, which is fair. And Mo talked about something I don't think any of us would have ever picked, right? Was how trying to determine when you're going to play a game during a rain delay. When
sure.
you're going to call a game, when all this stuff is like that, and I do think that's an interesting look at it, right? I mean, we don't really necessarily think about Mo making those calls,
Hmm.
right? But it obviously goes up to him to determine, if you're not going to play, then you've got to reschedule and you've got to, you got to figure out how you're going to do tickets and all that kind of stuff. And there's a lot of things there. And like you said, a lot of people have opinions whether they should play or not. But yeah, it's just not. That was an interesting wrinkle, I think, to start things off.
Yeah, it, trust me, I feel his pain on that one. You know what I mean? And I don't
Yeah,
have
you
to
got
deal
you
with,
got to deal with
and
it.
I don't have to deal with 40,000 fans. But yeah,
No,
weather's
no, yeah.
brutal.
That is true, you did.
Yeah.
You also got a chance to ask your question about the college game. Were you satisfied with your answer?
Oh, without a doubt. And I thought he made a great point. Um, it's one of those like we talked about last week of how you feel like that line that gap between college baseball to professional baseball. When I say professional baseball, I mean MLB.
Mhm,
Uh, has seemed to shorten. And I understand where he said Skeens is a once in a lifetime type situation, but you can tell that there will be guys that make their debut that were in their draft last year, if not the year before last. So, and I thought it was a very intriguing answer, and I thought that him pointing out, you know, it's different for college guys in their development because they pitch one day a week, and then said
mhm.
this, he goes, and that may be the right way to do it.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
thought, you know what? That makes a lot of sense because I've often wondered the college guys can get to 120 pretty easy, and it happens fairly early for them, but you don't see them again till the next Friday,
mm,
type situation. And it also, in the back of my mind, made me think they were always the first ones to push back on a 6-man rotation. Is that going to start becoming more common, or is it just tough enough to find 5 starters, that's going to shorten down a little bit, and we're going to see more of the bullpen game type situation. Or are we going to start extending the guys out a little bit more for that 1 day a week? I don't know. I mean, I really thought the answer was good, and I liked what he said about the reduction in the minor leagues, about how you were less than a 5% chance when you were drafted or signed, or however
Mhm.
it worked for you. I mean, I thought it all made a lot of sense, and opened up my eyes to some things that I hadn't even thought about when asking the question.
Yeah, I didn't note that point of maybe that's the way we should do it. I can't imagine how that works. I mean, it could. I mean, it would take some development for sure. But of course, college baseball doesn't play on like Mondays and Thursdays and stuff like. You get a couple days off a week in there anyway.
Oh yeah,
'Cause
so
they
it's
don't
usually
have to come up
you
with a 7-man rotation or something.
100%. You run a weekend rotation, and you usually play a Tuesday night game.
Yeah,
That's midweek game is what they call it. That's usually
yeah,
that's how it works out.
yeah. So I it would be obviously you can't go to that kind of schedule in MLB because
No,
either that or you have to
yeah.
cut things back. But it would be very interesting if you did a almost if almost it got to be where Friday night was the big night, right? Like college baseball, your big starters going on Friday, right? And
Mm,
that's and so if you
typically,
did
yeah.
that, yeah. So if you knew every Friday night basically that Sonny Gray was going up against somebody else big in an MLB. I mean, does that bring extra attention to the game? But then again, you have to fill in the rest of the week too.
Yeah.
And you know, unlike college baseball, where the series on the weekends are the important ones, and the midweek games are the kind of the who cares. Um, you know, you could have a really important series in the middle of the week, and you might just not get Sonny. Of course, that could happen now, right? I mean, Sonny Gray could pitch the day before a series and miss seeing the Brewers or something like that. But if you had them kind of rigid, then you'd wind up with some of these you know, back of the rotation guys having to face some of the better teams. And I don't know. I think it would be an interesting thought concept or a thought exercise to try to run out what MLB would look like if they did it more on the college scale.
True. That, yeah, it's interesting, and that's the thing, is I was like, what, I never really thought about that. I know that they were limited. I knew that they only threw the 1 day a week. That's why they could get to
Right.
the pitch counts that they did. But the way that he presented that, I was like, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Yeah, it did. It did. And it was, and again, all in all, it was a good thing. I'm trying to think if there was anything else that came out of that. Like I said, if you're listening to other Cardinal podcasts, there's a good chance you've already heard a lot about this, because so many were there, and so many have already done a really good job of covering it. So I don't think there's anything else probably to take away from that. Um, the schedule is supposedly getting easier. The Cubs this week, and is it? Do you think? I mean, you talking about how you were encouraged about this team. What do you think we're going to see out of the next? Well, running to the All Star break, they only play I think two winning teams. They play the Braves and the Royals, which is mind boggling, right? That the Royals are one of those teams.
Yeah, and they're really good.
Yeah. So, what do you think out of this? I mean, they play the Cubs, they play the Marlins, I mean, the Marlins are really pretty rough, but
Yeah.
and then they're playing, but basically everybody else in the schedule is right at that two games under 500, which is where the Cardinals are. Um, is this a situation where they can make hay where the sun shines, or is this a situation where we're going to probably see a lot of wins and losses and probably just kind of still battle around that 500 mark?
I mean, I would like to see the big takeoff. I mean, you win the series this weekend, you feel pretty good about things moving forward. Just because of the
Mhm.
rival, you get out of there. You never, like you said, you hit the nail on the head. You never know what happens in this series. You know what I mean? And some of it
Right.
may be ugly, and you may walk away, angry at some point. Um, I feel like they have a run in them. I always feel like that. Then
Yeah.
and toward the end when the summer gets hot and when you get guys coming back. I mean, you have the momentum now of seeing that Contreras will be in the lineup sooner rather than later. And then
Yeah.
you have the idea that you feel like Edmonds coming back pretty quick. There just feels like there's some positive momentum to what they're doing. I feel like your big lineup guys and Goldschmidt and Arenado is starting to hit. Arenado clearly is starting to hit.
Mhm.
Those are the things that made that we said this a month ago. If those two aren't anywhere, if they've completely dropped off their career norms, then they're not going to compete anyway. You know,
Right.
so now to see that they're kind of battling back and fighting through some stuff, and as the summer gets warm and things start moving around, I think they're a better team than what they've shown. I walked away from our interview the other day, or the Q&A the other day, more galvanized, feeling that way, because I felt like they feel that way. And I think that they're going to stay long enough in the Central to make hay. I don't think winning the division is completely out of the picture for them. And I say that just because I feel like Milwaukee may have played their best baseball and may have played their best baseball when everybody else was just kind of beating each other. It's one of those to where they have the same troubles that the Cardinals do. They don't score many runs, and they've just pitched a little bit better. It's surprising that they've played so well by trading, arguably their best hitter, and definitely losing their number one arm. So you
And
feel
number
like you're
2
going to
arm.
be in the race. That being said, it's going to be tough to tell until you play all the Central teams, and I think that we're just dipping our toe into that right now.
Yeah. What worries me, I mean, you talked about Goldschmidt and Arenado's hitting, and no one's had a couple good games. And we've seen both of those guys have 2 or 3 games where he's like, all right, here they go. And then they don't. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying? I
sure,
mean,
sure.
Goldie is hitting 245 for June, with the home run he hit yesterday was the first one he's hit this month.
Yeah,
So I as much as I want to say, okay, here they go, here they're back. I'm just afraid that it's I use this metaphor way too much, but it's Luke's X-wing and Dagobah Swamp. Luke tries to lift it up, and it starts going, and then it sinks right back down.
yeah,
So I hope that that's not the case. I mean, I think there's been a lot of concern around, less about Goldschmidt because he is a free agent at the end of the year, and if this is it, then this is it. But no one's under contract for a number of years. Still, he's younger, and and I've always been a big, huge fan of Arenado. So to see him struggle is concerning. I'm hopeful that we're starting to see some come around on that, but I feel like we saw that a couple of times, like last month where he had a home run or a couple home runs, and we're like, here we go, and then it fell off again. So,
yeah,
that being said, even if those guys aren't hitting, you're right. You get Contreras back, and you hope that he can get back to the level that he was at fairly quickly, and we'll see. I mean, it's not that's not a wrist injury. That's not a muscle injury. It's his arm is healed. So I think it's just a situation of getting his timing back, right? And
sure.
I don't think it's going to be a huge thing. And the fact that hopefully he's strong enough to throw out base runners, which is what Ivan Herrera cannot do.
Oh man, yeah,
Um,
he gets picked on.
yeah, it does. So that just having him back there may help a little bit in that regard. You get those guys, get that guy back, and hopefully you get Newt back at some point in time, at least for a few minutes before he gets hurt again. Um, and even if Goldie and Arenado aren't hitting, if you've got Mason Wynn continuing to, get on base the way he is, and Burleson hitting the way he is, and Gorman has had a bit of a hot stretch. You do worry about him because he's very streaky, but yeah, and again, I think the biggest thing for this team is the fact that nobody else is good either, right? I mean,
Yeah,
I agree with you that they're not completely out of the division race. I do worry about the fact that Milwaukee's got such a lead and they're going to go add on pieces.
yeah,
But, it's also, we've seen Milwaukee struggle in the second half before. So, if they got really hot, yeah, they could, I think they could make it interesting. But, again, we're not even talking about, okay, the first 2 wild cards are 10 games up and we're just fighting through trying to get to that last one, right? They've got a chance for the first wild card, if they play well,
yeah,
and not just out of their minds play well, just play slightly over 500 baseball, and they've got a chance for that. So they could be comfortably in the playoff picture with a 550 month, and I talked about that in the Substack. A 550 month is a 550 is like 89 wins, and that's a little bit more than we thought this team was going to do. But for a stretch like a month, yeah, they could put that together, and then you could look up at the All-Star break and find yourself 4 or 5 games clear of that last wild card spot, and feel pretty good about what you're doing, and definitely be adding on at the trade deadline.
Yeah. I mean, can you ask for much more at this point?
Right.
After last year.
No, not at all. And I had a chance, to briefly talk with Katie Wu, and I said, that's just that's a little bit indicative of where we're at, because we got excited about 500. We got excited about, hey, they got a chance to, be the second wild card. They can make the play. You know, 10 years ago, if you said, this is a 500 team, people are getting fired, right? I mean, because
Mhm.
that was the expectation was to win the division, to win 90 plus games, and, have a deep postseason run. And somehow that has shifted, and I don't know that I think the organization still has the idea that they're going to win the World Series every year, but the the team has struggled enough, and that now we're happy with, I don't want to say happy, but we're well, kind of, with a 500 team that's in the wild card race. I mean, granted, anything off of last year is going to make you feel better. I mean, you're just like, well,
Yeah,
it wasn't that bad, but the standards have slipped over the last decade to where we're expecting less and less, and part of that's expanded playoffs, and you just get in, that kind of idea. But um and I know fans have tried to demand more, but you have to, you know accept what you get, I guess, to some
sure.
degree. And I think that is more than anything uh a symptom of how bad things have gotten around the organization.
Sure. Yeah. And we both agree with that. I mean,
Yeah.
we've said that forever, that it's, just basically spending just to get to the bottom rung. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, and you know
I got it.
and to some degree it's not even that, right? Because they do spend.
Sure.
And when you've got a Goldie and an Arenado on the team, that's takes a lot of your payroll. But um, I don't know. I think that's going to be Mo talked about how his group's been together a long time, and you worry about people getting stale and stuff like that. And I do think whoever replaces Mo is probably not Gersh or Flores.
Yeah.
I mean, does that mean it's Heimblum? I'd say he's a front runner now, but I also don't know that he's interested in the job, right? I mean, we don't know that he's moved his family to St. Louis or anything like that. He may not. That may not be what he wants to do. He may be fine working on a freelance basis, but he may not want to lock himself down. But I do think they're going to look for somebody outside, and I think after that, it's going to be very interesting to see how the organization changes once that happens.
Yeah.
And it could be for the worse. I mean, I'm not, again, I don't want to say that, make this sound like we got problems with Mo at all, but it is. It's a situation where this team, he's been, what did he say? He's been with the organization for, it was over 20 years, wasn't it? I've forgotten how long he's been in baseball, like 30, but I want
Yeah.
to say he's been, he's been GM since 2007. So, it's been quite some time. So, um, occasional fresh blood is not a bad thing, and that's why they brought in Heimblum. So I don't know. I think it's gonna be very interesting to see how that goes, and I'd like to think that maybe we're in our 1970s version of the Cardinals, and the 1980s version is coming along, or
Yeah.
the early 2000s, or whatever, however you want to use it. That there's that fallow period before you have a really good decade, and I'd like to think that maybe that's what's going to happen.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it very could. Very well could. I mean, that's new blood's not always bad blood.
No, that is true. All right. Well, we've probably hit all that we're going to hit on this one. But again, was a fun weekend. We're glad to have had it and look forward to next year. Alan, I'll be back with you next week, and we'll be talking about hopefully a really good week with, like I said, with the Cubs and the Marlins. If we're not talking about a really good week, things may get kind of ugly. So, Anyway, for Alan, I'm Daniel. Good night.
Good night.
0-1 to Pujols. In the air, left field, and Pujols has given St. Louis the lead. A dramatic, towering 3-run home run. Stunned in disbelief here in Houston.